Of Labor's national broadband network has found the policy's formation was rushed, chaotic and inadequate. The report by former Telstra Director Bill Scales, commissioned by the current government, says the plan was never properly analysed before being adopted. He's called for a cost-benefit analysis for any public infrastructure project worth more than $1 billion. Mike Clay looks back at the evolution of the NBN.
They were the heady days of 2007. Markets were up, the budget was in surplus, and a boy from Brisbane was selling his plan for a national broadband network.
My name's Kevin, I'm from Queensland, I'm here to help.
Kevin Rudd's NBN would be a fibre-to-the-node network, and the private sector would build it, with $4.7 billion of taxpayer money. But the private sector didn't want a bar of it, and when the GFC put the squeeze on private funding, the government said, well, we'll build it ourselves, and we'll lay fibre all the way to the premises, all 93% of them. The new network was to be built by 2021 and would cost $43 billion.
We need a new way to drive the economy forward. We must work with business to grow the economic pie.
But after major cost overruns and missed rollout deadlines, the newly elected coalition government called time and replaced the leadership at the government-owned NBN Co. They now want the company to meet a faster, cheaper target and are waiting on a cost-benefit analysis and strategic review to point the way.
The government is thoroughly open-minded. We are not dogmatic about technology.
The preference is to lay cable all the way to the premises for less than a quarter of households. The other 71% would rely on Telstra's ageing copper network for that so-called final mile. This would be much cheaper, but also much slower.
As a general rule, bad projects get worse. It's much harder to turn around a failing project than it is to start one from scratch and get it right.
Today, the former Productivity Commission head, Bill Scales, has slammed the way Labor formed its policy. There was no business case, no cost-benefit analysis, only perfunctory consideration by Cabinet, and a full range of options wasn't considered.
And so it was always a reckless, crazy way to go about public policy. Extraordinary that a commitment of that kind would be made with so little consideration.
The former Labor Communications Minister, Stephen Conroy, says the Scales review is little more than political point scoring.
This is one of 6 reports that entire purpose is to run a smokescreen and cover because his own policy has failed to meet its targets.
So with the NBN in a holding pattern until the government charts a new course, are reviews and audits constructive, or are they just ways to kick the Labor Party?
Kirsten Needham, let's turn to you. Should this be the new golden rule for expenditure of great licks of taxpayer dollars, that if you want to spend more than $1 billion, best have an independent review? I mean, would that make a difference in New South Wales where you report, or are some independent reviewers more independent than others?
Oh, look, it would seem logical, wouldn't it? If you're going to spend $1 billion, let's find out whether it's going to work, whether it's needed. But sadly,
you idealist.
I know. Sadly, I think, and particularly here in New South Wales, where we've just had $20 billion worth of projects sort of announced as thought bubbles as a way to sell the idea of electricity privatisation. These projects are about winning votes. They're about winning elections. That's when they're announced during election campaigns or leading up to them. This report's saying, well, OK, make your election promises, but after the election, go and get them costed. Go and, you know, find out whether the thing is what's needed, is it going to work, and let the public know. So it's one thing to say get the cost-benefit analysis done, it's another to publish it. And I really can't see if a government has sold a road to the electorate because they want certain seats, if they've said that this second harbour crossing is, you know, the panacea for the city's woes, they're not going to turn around and dump it because the report says it's not quite the best value for money.
Gary Humphries?
Well, look, I mean, that's true. But I mean, nothing's going to stop politicians from having a bright idea and using it to buy votes. But as Kirsty points out, it's about not implementing that until you've got the hard data on the table saying this will work, this will cost how much, etc., etc. The problem we've got, though, Ellen, is not that we have these big ideas. It's that people expect government to solve problems. And when there's an issue like, you know, slow broadband or whatever, people turn to government and say, you fix this.
Fix it.
And sometimes it's a disaster when they respond to that impulse.
Bob Brown, I mean, the elephant in the room on this one is, of course, the paid parental leave scheme, $5.5 billion, another of the Prime Minister's captain's calls, leadership calls. Does it matter if the leader makes a call like that with great licks of public money?
Yes, of course it does. On the other hand, would we have had the Sydney Opera House if we'd have taken this course of action? But when it comes to NBN, you know, it's everybody's right to be fixed up with a fast-moving, functional, modern network like the South Koreans have got. And there's a lot of dithering with the current government. They haven't come up with a good alternative, and now the challenge is right over to them.
All right, you're watching The Drum.